Ahem. All right. Sounds like this is on, right? Bible. All right, well, I'm glad everybody's in such a jolly mood this morning. So welcome. And I hate to ruin your gaiety with a Bible study, but I think it's about time for that. Any special news or anything? Anything interesting to report to the group? I saw the email that Mr. Biebert returned his call, so that's great news. Congratulations. And you don't have to worry about that now. You're good till, next fall? It's the next time you can get a call, right? Probably, unless they break the rules. I thought it was 2 per season, so that's good. You're off the hook. Nobody else? I'm up in April for calls. Who knows if I'll get one, but... I could mention this now. I was just at a pastor's conference, and there's something like 120 vacancies in the Senate. So just playing the odds, I'll probably get one. That's not to brag about my awesome skills that are well known throughout the Senate. That's just to say, there's a lot of shortages, so they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. They don't care. They will call anybody after they've called 20 people and they've all said no. So don't be shocked if that happens, and I'll try not to cry if it doesn't happen. And it's almost embarrassing if you don't get one, actually. Like among all I got several friends that I talk to that are all pastors, and the way they'll put it will be like, so when are you going to get a call again, or when are you up for a call? Because like I forget if it's 6 months or whatever, I've got several friends who write on the dot and get a call every 6 months. And one of them, he hasn't taken a call since he was assigned. So for 13, 14 years now, and he's been getting them for almost 10 years, and he's never taken one, but so that's just how it goes. Yeah, so many vacancies we just learned about at this pastor's conference, pastor and teacher shortages. So anybody even thinking about it, the nice thing about being a called worker, of course, you're serving the Lord, you're working with God's Word all the time, and, you'll never be super rich, but you won't be poor, and you'll probably, it won't be that hard to, we can't predict the future, but it seems like you'll be employed, at least right now, for the next foreseeable future. There's just such a gap, a lack of called workers that it's going to be very difficult to fill. Very difficult. So you'll have employment, basically. Let's see, is there anything else to share with you guys about the conference? I was going to mention it at the end of the service, too. I did manage to get us a vicar to come preach this summer when I'm on vacation. So that was something the elders talk about, and I secured it. So, and what's that? Yeah. Oh, I found him in the parking lot. He was just getting his stuff out of his car, and I said, "Hey, Pastor Schwartz, remember that text I sent you? You never got back to me." But he knew, and the vicar was right there. So we got it worked out. And he's when he is here, I'll give you this reminder again. But just be real supportive. He seems like he's still kind of nervous. I think probably we all were at that point. I've just kind of forgotten. But he said, sometimes I'm worried that I don't have much to say after about 12 minutes. And I said, just stop at 12 minutes. No one's ever going to complain your service is too short. Yeah. No. I was telling him to relax. Very nice congregation. They'll be happy, however long it is. They don't care. Just when you feel you're done, it's okay to stop. So he was nervous about that. Yeah. No, this is for all the pastors in the region, including the Alaska pastors, the Oregon pastors, and all Washington, all Idaho. No, this time I was very happy. They decided to be more frugal, so we went to Kennewick, and we had the conference in a church, and that's what we're probably going to do from now on with the pastor-only conference, because we have one with the teachers in the fall and at the beginning of the summer, And that one is more at a, needs to be at a bigger place, especially the one in the fall because people bring families. But this one, it's just the pastors, no families, so a little more Spartan. And we all agreed that's what we'd rather do. We had been meeting at a casino, and it was cheaper, but it just keeps rising exponentially, and especially to pay thousands of dollars for a room to sit in when we can all fit in a church, what's the point of paying that? So that was nice. And let's see, there's a lot of stuff going on in the Synod. They're planning to start 100 missions, so it's good to remember. The Vine is nice, and it's good we're helping and supporting with that, and we should, but there's lots of other missions going on. And one other thing, I can't give you the details yet, but it's possible we are going to arrange a weekend mission trip, service trip to another church within our district. But I don't have all those details nailed down, and I don't want to say it till I know more. But that's another possibility that came up. All right, well, yes, Lance. Yeah.
There were years ago,
Yeah.
at least 5 years ago, they used to have the Northwest District Men's Gathering.
That was canceled the last couple years because of COVID. I don't know if they're having it this year.
Yes, they are.
They are, okay.
I was going to ask you if you brought up our place in us.
That retreat would never even came up. I mean, we didn't talk about it at all. I don't think has anyone from this congregation ever gone? When you were here, though?
Oh, when I was here.
Yeah.
The men's thing?
Yeah.
Simon and I have gone. It was at Fort Gordon.
Okay.
But that's when we were in.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm seriously thinking about doing it. When is this? The last weekend of April. That's not perfect.
I'm
part of the Facebook group.
Oh, okay.
I got the last part of April, Saturday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All right? Is it going to be Fort Gordon again? Yeah, it's back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we should maybe mention that later, or send me the info and I'll put it in our bulletin. That sounds like a good idea. I don't think people from Eastern Washington typically go, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't or couldn't.
There's usually a bunch from Yakima. It's about
Oh, okay.
That's about the farthest east.
Yeah.
I remember seeing them when I was over there.
Okay.
But there's a bunch that come up from Portland too.
Yeah. I've heard it's very well done. So, okay. All right. Any other things to mention? Glad your surgery went well, Mark, and you're with us again. So, all right. We'll turn to the Bible now and the writing on the wall. This is one of those Bible phrases that has, sort of found its way into popular culture. We still say the writing on the wall all the time, and it's about 30 verses, so I think we'll be able to get through it here. You probably all kind of know the story, but we'll go through and look at some of the details. Now, this is the end of the Babylonian Empire. We are not yet to the Medes and the Persians. We will have that transition next week. So this is the same group that Daniel was with when he first came to Babylon. And let's see, it says, verse 1, King Belshazzar, look at your handout, it says, this chapter takes place in 539 BC, some 30 years after the events of chapter 4. The Medo-Persian army had recently invaded the nation of Babylon. The city of Babylon was in grave peril. Daniel was a very old man by this time, most likely in his 80s. Well, how do we get that? We know he was taken in about 600, and we figure he was 10 to 20 years old at that point, and it's now 60 years after that, so he's at least 60. Well, no, he's at least 70 and probably closer to 80 years old at this time. And we just got to remember what's happening right now. The city is surrounded by an enemy army that we know will take the city, but what are they doing? They're partying. So, not a bit, really. I mean, if you know your time is up, that's not a bad strategy, I guess, but let's read it. Verses 1 through 4. Who would like to set us up? Oh, yes, it's right here. Anybody? Are you sure you can with just the one hand? Okay.
It didn't affect the vocal cords.
All right.
King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives and his concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his nobles, his wives and his concubines, drank from them. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone.
Okay, so question 1 we can answer. What sins were committed at the banquet? Yeah, and that's probably the second thing. Which was the greatest sin? Well, probably that one. These items were supposed to be only in the temple of Jerusalem. They had taken them, they had, desecrated them, and now they're using them for a drunken, raucous party, we can presume. Any other sins that you notice?
Praising the gods of inanimate objects.
Yeah, so that one, and I guess you could argue that's the worst sin too, but they're praising lots of false gods. Mocking the true God while you praise false gods. Anything else?
It's just interesting that the gods they praise kind of relate back to the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, the statue.
Oh, yeah, because of the gold, the silver, the bronze, iron, wood, and stone? Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. Part of that is because those are just the main elements, people use. But still, you're right. It is kind of pretty interesting. That dream is being fulfilled, part of it right now, as they switch empires. So, I think we've covered that. That's just setting up the story. Now, verse 5 and 6. We can keep going with Mark for a few more.
Suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall, near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking.
Yeah, and I guess you can understand why, right? I mean, a giant hand. This is a kind of a unique miracle. I mean, can you think of any other thing like this that happened in the Bible where it's almost like a hologram? Yeah, I guess. Similar, but I mean, sort of different because the bush is just sitting out there in the wilderness and he sees it and he goes to it. This one, they're in a room and all of a sudden, a giant hand. I mean, when else? I can't think of anything too similar to that. Tongues of fire, yeah, kind of similar. I mean, just out of nowhere, in a room. I mean, especially that you're inside, where does this thing come from? And so we can see why he's afraid. So then verses 7 through, just 7. Boy, long verse. Mark, can you read 7?
The king summoned the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. Then he said to these wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom."
Yes. So he wants to tell what this means, and he makes this promise. This is what we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, that the Nabonidus, who was the actual ruler at this time, he disappeared. He seems to have gone crazy or something, or just had a religious epiphany, and he's no longer functioning the ruler, so he's the first guy in charge, but he's out of the picture. So then Belshazzar is the second highest in the kingdom, and that is why he's promising to make someone the third highest in the kingdom. And by the way, that is a detail of the Bible that was not understood until they dug up some of these ancient tablets and stuff and figured out what was going on. They always thought, why does he say third? There were all sorts of strange guesses, people trying to figure it out. So it's an example where archaeology has illuminated the meaning of the Bible. But he's promising to do this for whoever can interpret it. Now, you'd think they should call in Daniel first. He's got a good track record. As you can see, question 2 says, once again, Daniel was called on last, even though he had been honored several times before. We haven't actually read that verse, though, so let's go ahead and read 7 through 12. And this can be your last section, Mark. Yes, 8 through 12. That's what I said.
Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled. The queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. "May the king live forever," she said. "Don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel, whom the king called Belshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means."
All right, so question 2 then. Why might it be that they didn't call on Daniel right away? Yeah, they forgot about him. And there had been, now there is a question. Why it calls Nebuchadnezzar his father. Now, was he literally his father? Was that just how you referred to the previous administration? Because it does, the tablets they found do say that Nabonidus, who would have been this guy's actual father, it seems, was not of the royal line. But then again, maybe that detail was wrong. Or people would often sort of claim to be like an adopted son, or, that's how they claim legitimacy to the throne. They don't just, or they say, you were selected. Maybe you're not my actual son, but now you're like my son because I want you to rule. Something like that. But why would they have forgotten? I mean, how could you have forgotten Daniel and all the stuff that he did? Let's see, he interpreted the one dream and he saved everybody from getting killed. Then he hasn't been in the lion's den, right? But he interpreted that other dream for Nebuchadnezzar. Well, it's been a long time. What did it say? 30 years after the events of chapter 4? So 30 years is long enough to forget? Yeah. Yeah. So there'd been a lot of turnover, and in 30 years you'd expect that. Anyway, with a kind of a new administration, you'd expect that even more so. Yeah.
So it says the queen.
Mm-hmm.
The queen is the king's wife, right?
Well, I'm not sure. I'd have to look into this. Who would be the functioning queen? I get the impression it's Nabonidus' wife. Maybe it's even Nebuchadnezzar's wife. I mean, maybe she still survived. I am not sure. Oh, I think there's almost no way that it's Belteshazzar's own wife. Oh, Queen Mother in the footnotes, yeah. So it's either his mother or it's maybe even Nebuchadnezzar's wife who's still alive. And maybe it's both. Maybe that was his literal family, and the tablets that we have just don't record that accurately for some reason. But that, there's probably something funny going on. We just don't know. There's a lot of odd things that can happen with these royal families and who gets to succeed who. All right, yeah.
Could be the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar and the wife.
Ah, yes, that would totally make sense of it. So if he married into the family, he is now going to call Nebuchadnezzar his father. So that would make a lot of sense. That's probably what it is. What study Bible is that? NIV study Bible? Yeah. There you go. That makes the most sense of it. So in any case, it's been forgotten. There's been a lot of change. There's been 30 years. And so, but she remembers. Of course she remembers. She was young at the time it happened. She was there. So then now we got verses 13 through 16. Want to pass the mic to who else would like to read? Donna, you're a good reader. You don't want to read. Okay. Anybody? Jim's got it? Thank you.
So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father, the king, brought from Judah? I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and you have insight, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom. The wise men and enchanters were brought before me to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they could not explain it. Now, I have heard that you are able to give interpretations and to solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom.
Okay. He did what?
He's getting his old job back.
Yeah. So apparently he's maybe been demoted. Maybe he's retired at this point too, But now he gets his chance. And I don't know, should we have it here? 3. What lesson should Belshazzar have learned from the experience of his father? Oh, wait, he should have learned to listen to Daniel. And I think maybe we're going to get more of the answer in the next paragraph, come to think of it. So now, let's see. Could you read 17 through... It's kind of a long one. Let's see. 17 through 24. If you're comfortable, or you could pass it along, but I think you're doing a good job.
Then Daniel answered the king, You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. Your Majesty, the Most High God, gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave them, all the nations and people of every language dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted, and those he wanted to humble, he humbled. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from deposed.
Yep,
Is that right? Okay.
deposed.
From his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He lived with the wild donkeys and ate grass like the ox, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over all kingdom on earth and sets over them anyone he wishes.
Okay, just pausing there. We read about this last week. But that was 30 years ago. Obviously, an event that some people still would have remembered. And here we're going to get the answer to question 3. So keep going with 22 through 24.
But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines, drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription.
Okay, yeah, so what lesson should Belshazzar have learned from the experiences of his father?
Humbleness.
Yeah, humility. What should that humility have led him to do or not do?
Not mess with God and his stuff in his temple.
Yeah, remember Nebuchadnezzar had praised the Most High God, had said, cursed is anybody, not really cursed, but punished. Anybody who curses or doesn't respect the true God is going to be harmed, is going to be, I think, destroyed, house made into rubble, all that kind of stuff. So Nebuchadnezzar would never have done this with the articles from the temple,
Coming in here and getting the chalice and taking it to our home and having a high party and bringing it back.
Yeah, I guess it would be kind of like that.
Not even bringing it back, just tossing it away.
Okay, well, she says it would be like taking our chalice, and yeah, we really haven't used a chalice since COVID, but imagine we had a couple chalices. You know what a chalice is. It's the fancy cup the wine goes in. Taking those home and partying with those. Now, how is this even a little worse than that? Because how do they add insult to injury? Well, they're unbelievers, yeah. And not only are they drinking and partying with the chalices, I mean, that's the first half. But what's the other thing they're doing that just makes it even all the more wicked? Yeah. Yeah, they're praising false gods at the same time. It has been said. I was just belaboring the point. So it's really, really bad. And you can see why God is heavily insulted by this, and he decides this is the time to bring down the judgment. And the next day, I think, or even that night, they breached the city at night. And so, well, we'll get to that here in a minute. So he didn't learn to respect the Most High God. He should have learned that. Nebuchadnezzar learned it. I don't know if he became a believer per se or how you classify that, but he certainly respected the Most High God and wouldn't let anyone insult him. Whether he gave up his other idols, I don't know. So now I think we're ready for the dramatic conclusion. Anybody want to read? What? I need to read it? Oh, because of the hard words and stuff. Yeah, good point. This is the inscription that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. Here is what these words mean. Little Aramaic lesson for you. Mene, although actually these are all kind of weird words. You know, if these were the regular words, it wouldn't have been so confusing for... If it had just been a straightforward sentence with regular words, it wouldn't have been hard to read. But these are all, how do you describe it? They're similar to regular words, but yeah, they're a little off the wall. The spelling is slightly unusual, and they're not put together in a full sentence, and so you don't know what to do. That was a good pun, though. Thank you. So, mene, your footnotes tells you pretty much. Mene can mean numbered or mina, a unit of money. So the root that means counting or money is mana, and so this just has two vowels, mene. God has numbered your days, the days of your reign, and brought it to an end. Tekel, that's C. By the way, in Hebrew it would be shekel. You've probably heard the word shekel before. In Aramaic it's tekel, and they actually would have said thekel. And there's a funny sound they had in Hebrew that was kind of like a like between a SH and a TH, and or that it becomes TH in Aramaic and SH in Hebrew. Anyway, tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Tekel means weighted or shekel. And peres, which notice it said parsin up there, and then it says Perez here, and it's confusing. Perez can mean divided or Persia or half of a mina or a half shekel. So all these words kind of have plays on meaning, but here the Persians, I mean, it is funny because the word divide sounds like the word for Persian. What are the odds? And his kingdom's going to be divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Any thoughts on what this means? Your reign's brought to an end. You've been weighed and found wanting, so I'm giving your kingdom to the Medes and the Persians instead. I don't know. How would you react if you were Belshazzar? You'd hope he'd repent. And the reason this would be pretty convincing is that they were surrounded. This whole thing is happening when they're surrounded by the Persian army. And what ended up happening is there was some water going into the city, and they ended up rerouting that river and then going in underneath, and that's how they kind of conquered the city. So then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom, which is almost worse now because, I mean, is he going to be a target when they attack? But somehow he ends up surviving. God protects him. Yeah.
It seems kind of weird that he just chastised the king and then the king turned around and here, be number 3.
Well, maybe he was humbled in some way, you know? I mean, first of all, he did promise this. He did say he would do it, and it probably rang true and sounded convincing because of what we mentioned. Yeah, Simon.
If somebody from a powerful
Yeah.
give them a gift so that they pass it on to their boss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to bribe them. To bribe their boss indirectly, right? Saying, oh yeah, I'll be good.
Are you saying this is kind of like a bribe to Daniel and to God? Yeah, could be. That's one way to look at it. Either he's humbled and he's actually appreciative, or maybe he just feels he's got to keep his word because Daniel did interpret the dream, or maybe he thinks he can buy himself more time, but he fulfills his promise. You know, he's probably kind of drunk by this point too. I mean, who knows what he's going through his mind. He's at this party, feasting and drinking. And then verse 30, that very night Belshazzar, the king of the Babylonians, was slain. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. And let's see, verse 31. And the next verse, by the way, in chapter 6, verse 1, this is part of chapter 5 in Hebrew. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom. Kind of an odd place to stop, but that's where chapter 5 ends in Hebrew. Now, Darius, just so you know, there is a historical question here. Who is this guy, Darius? Because the king Darius is not the king of Persia at this time. It's Cyrus. And maybe you remember, Cyrus is the one who issues the proclamation that the Jews can go back. So why does it mention Darius? And there are many different explanations, but the one that I like the most is this was Darius, the emperor. He was not yet emperor. He was now a military commander who was in charge of Babylon. He was not in charge of all Persia at this point. He later would be, but he was part of the army that took over Babylon, and then when you take over the city of Babylon, you're now in charge of administering its kingdom. You know, you're in charge of all that territory that they control that hasn't, been fully assimilated into the Persian Empire. But just so you're aware, there are a lot of historical kind of question marks with Daniel, but all of them have pretty good solutions. But they're usually kind of complicated to figure out. If you're interested in pursuing that question in more depth, I could point you to some papers about it. But let's get to the application here. Number 4, how did Daniel prove himself to be a faithful prophet? Yes, Mark.
He just told the king that he was out of a job and he'd be slain.
Yeah.
And he didn't even waver, so he trusted in the Lord to watch over him.
Yeah. So he's not afraid to speak truth to power. He's not intimidated. And I think that's one of the things that the Jews had in ancient times, and I think Christians have today. Ultimately we fear God more than we fear the government. And that's not true for most people. And so we can be more honest, and we can give critiques and feedback that maybe other people are afraid to give. Maybe not just even, thinking of government, but at your workplace or wherever. If you're more afraid of God than you are of your boss, and if your boss is doing something wrong, maybe you will be comfortable saying something when other coworkers just go along because they're afraid to say something. I don't know, anyone have any thoughts on that? That as Christians, as God's people, we're not afraid to speak the truth, even if there are negative repercussions for ourselves, or potential negative repercussions. Yeah.
It happened to me
Yeah?
in the Navy, and I used it as a teaching experience for my children. You have to stand up for what's right, even if the boss is the boss of you.
Wow, yeah. I mean, I don't know what detail you want to share, but your boss was doing something wrong or asking people to do something wrong, or?
It might be boring for everybody else, but a person took an example.
Oh, could you take the mic as long as it's right there? Because we might have a few people listening.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I had a person take the chief's exam, and you can take the chief's exam, but you cannot be promoted unless you're within standards. And this person, body weight standards, this
Yeah.
person had failed the PRT 3 times. And he made, he passed the exam and he was going to be promoted to chief. And I told my boss, my commander, that it couldn't. I mean, you need to take his name off the list. And my commander went behind my back and wrote a special evaluation stating that he had passed the exam, passed the test, the PRT test, body weight standards and everything, and submitted it to the next echelon. And then he did something stupid. He left that eval on the copier.
Oh,
And I found it. And I knew it was wrong. And
yeah.
What she's not telling you is she was the physical fitness coordinator, so she knew this guy did not pass
Okay,
his
okay.
test.
So you had the inside knowledge, and then you get the actual report. Yeah.
so I confronted him. I confronted my boss. Well, first of all, I went home to Mark and I says, "Oh, Mark, this is what's going on." And Mark says, "Well, you have to do what you have to do." You know, he basically threw it back in my face. And I said, I took it right to through my chain of command. So I started with the senior chief. Senior chief told me to forget it, let it go. And I requested a meeting with my commander and my senior chief basically yelled at me and told me that there wasn't a thing that I could do, that I was wrong and they were right, and I'm like, So I went to the next person on my chain of command, which was the Master Chief at our Readiness Command, and I told him, I says, "Master Chief, I don't know what to do." I said, "This is what happened, here's all the stuff," and he says, do you have proof?" And I said, "Of course I have proof. I wouldn't be bringing this to you if I didn't." And he said, "Send it to me." So I faxed all the information. Next thing I knew, I was called in my commander's office, being yelled at because he got yelled at by his boss and had to retract everything.
Oh boy.
Well, my entire unit kind of blackballed me because they only heard senior chief's side of the story. And anyway, it ended all right because I went to everyone and I said, "Look, you know me. You've known me for, by that time it was like 9 years. You know I'm not going to do something wrong. I'm not going to mess with somebody's career unless it's wrong. And what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong." Anyway, they welcomed me back in, but it was a teaching moment for my kids.
No kidding.
I thought, because if they see their mom not doing it, what's right, then why are they going to assume that they have to?
Well, that's good because, the Bible, if you read the prophets and stuff, we've read some of those before. We just read Amos. I think the worst thing that can happen to a society is corruption. Corruption is just the worst when you got people lying and cheating, and it's hard to root out once it's in because it becomes endemic and people are sneaky, and so you can't catch them in it, and it just gets worse and worse, and then they only, so it's good to stand up and do that. And as Christians, we don't have to be afraid of the boss. We can just fear God and do the right thing. So, good example. Thanks. Jim? Oh. Yeah. People don't want the trouble. And Daniel could have said he didn't want the trouble, but, he didn't care. He was serving God. He was just saying what's true, doing what's right. Any other thoughts on that? So that's one good application. Any other applications you took away from this reading real quick? We'll end soon because we got people showing up for worship, but any other thoughts or applications? All right, well, great. We'll resume in about 15 minutes for worship. How you doing? Good. Doing the candles. Okay. Yeah.
Check the battery level on the other mic.
Is this one low?
Oh, it's on 3.
So it should be good. Might be good to have a backup. I can check at the offering, and if it's dead, I can turn the other one on and put it out. You know, that's another nice thing. Even if we're not using 2 at a time, it is good to just have the other one so I don't have to change batteries mid-service.
Well, that's 3.
Mm-hmm.
This one's 4. So I'll turn this one on.